cell phone killed the Tacoma's manual transmission. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. That's right, I blame the cell phone for killing the Tacoma's manual transmission. Now, you might say, well, the Tacoma is still available in a manual transmission, so it's not, completely gone yet. And while that's true, it is. But try to find a manual transmission Tacoma on a lot anywhere. I wanted one. I had to special order it. I couldn't just go somewhere around here anyway and find one. No, I know they still do build them. They're building about, I think, 5%, probably less now, of their total build are manual transmissions. That means 95% are automatics. And I'm sitting here in a Jeep Gladiator right now, driving around in an automatic transmission. So why did or how did the cell phone kill the Tacoma's manual transmission, or at least put it on that path? Well, I think it's pretty simple, right? I mean, back in the old days, back in the 1800s when I first started driving, there were lots of manual transmissions around, right? I learned how to drive on a manual transmission, and people bought them because they were cheaper. It was always cheaper to buy a manual transmission, and it's still a little bit cheaper now, which is kind of surprising since you really have to special order them, but they still are cheaper. But that gap closed quite a bit. They used to be substantially cheaper than an automatic. Not anymore. So I think once that gap closed a bit, people weren't as attracted to them anymore. There wasn't a price reason to go out and buy a manual transmission. For just a few $100 more, you could get an automatic. But that's not the biggest reason. A few years ago, I don't know, maybe it's about 15-ish, something like that, years ago, when the cell phone really became mainstream, right? You remember the old cell phones? They used to come in a bag. It was called a bag phone, right? It's not something you could easily manipulate and use in your car. But once that changed and the cell phone became those little flipper things, and then we added the internet and all of that functionality, apps, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, all of those extra things that you can now do on a cell phone that you couldn't do back then, it meant that you needed to have your hands free, right? And if you've got a manual transmission, listen to that cold air intake, man. But if you had a manual transmission and you had to have your hands, hopefully you kept your left one on the wheel and your right one on the shifter. I don't know, maybe you used your foot, although you need one for the gas and one for the clutch. But anyway, every appendage you have is occupied when you're driving a manual transmission, unless you're going down a straight road and you're at speed and you don't have to change gears or anything. But otherwise, you need to be able to have all these other arms and legs and stuff to be able to drive a manual, and that means you can't be on your phone, right? You can't be sitting there typing. You're not supposed to do this when you're driving, right? But look around. People do it all the time. I mean, fortunately for me, I'm on a cell phone right now filming this, but my cell phone is on a magnetic mount on the windshield, so I can still see everything in front of me without having to stare down or concentrate on a text or an email. But once we had internet capability for everybody at affordable prices on a cell phone, it changed everything. No longer could you stand to be able to not be, or at least have the ability to be on your phone. And that meant that you couldn't be driving in slower traffic. I doubt there's a lot of people out there who daily, maybe some, but daily jump on the freeway and have a lot of free space where they could still be on their phone, Typically, I think it's in an area that's more suburban, where you're going to have to be stopping and starting, and that doesn't leave you a lot of time to be on your phone in between switching gears and stuff. So I think the cell phone really played a big role in destroying the manual transmission in the Tacoma. People just aren't buying them anymore because they have other, I guess, more important things to do with their hands. You don't want to be dedicating your hands and your feet, if you use your feet to text, I don't know, to shifting and driving a manual transmission, right? You got to have your hands free. You have to have your hands free so that you can manipulate that phone, send that text, answer that email, I don't know, take a selfie and send it out real quick. Whatever you do on your cell phone, and you know you do. You don't want to be screwing with a manual. Now, what I think is interesting, a lot of vehicles now are coming out with voice-activated features, you know? I mean, they're already in a lot of things now. You can respond to texts, you can talk to your radio, much like Alexa or that other Google thing they have, whatever it is. Siri, hopefully it doesn't come on now. But you can talk to your phone, you can talk to your car, you can tell it to do stuff. And I think that technology is only going to become better, number one, and more prevalent. I think there'll be a day, and I believe it's already available in some vehicles, but you can tell your car to do pretty much everything except for accelerate. Will that be coming with the battery powers? Who knows? Who knows? But I think once that day gets here, it's possible that we might actually see a little bit of a re-emergence or a increase in popularity of the manual transmission. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't think it's ever going to be what it once was, but there could be enough interest left out there so that maybe the manual transmission doesn't completely go away. Maybe there'll be enough interest so that the manufacturers can justify building a few manual transmissions and we can keep that alive. Because I think it would be a real shame if the manual transmission went away altogether. You know, a lot of people will argue that you don't need a manual because you've got those little shifter paddles. You can drive a manual and get the manual experience by using those shifter paddles. You know, either on your steering wheel or running through the gears with the automatic gear selector stick. I think they call it a stick. But I got to tell you, it is not the same thing. If you think that driving a manual transmission and driving a car and running through the gears in the manual mode is the same, then I'd say you've probably never driven a manual transmission. They are completely different animals. It is a completely different experience. And it's certainly not as satisfying. But I've heard that argument before. Anyway, I just wanted to get on here, kind of talk about that a little bit. I honestly believe, other than the cost, it really is the cell phone that has killed the manual transmission in the Tacoma. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. If you learned or maybe drove or even know how to drive a manual transmission, why did you opt to go for an automatic? Why have you left the manual transmission in your rearview mirror? I'd be curious to know. Also, real quick, if you haven't before, check out my other channel. Don't forget to click that notification bell so that you don't miss out on any upcoming videos. And do me a favor, smash that subscribe button on the way out. Thanks for watching. Stay safe out there. Consider a manual. Bye.